Believing his money gave him the right to do anything, the tourist mocked the Queen's guard, pushing boundaries and provoking the horse, all for attention. But the guard's sudden, unexpected reaction left the crowd in stunned silence. Just as the tension peaked, an authoritative figure emerged from the shadows, ready to deliver a dramatic twist no one saw coming. And this was only the beginning. London bustled in its typical grandeur. Red double-deckers cruised past iconic landmarks. Tourists armed with cameras zigzagged between the postcard-perfect telephone booths, and pigeons brazenly darted for crumbs near Trafalgar Square. Amidst this whirlpool of activity, an unwavering sentinel stood tall, a Queen's Guard poised outside Buckingham Palace. He was the embodiment of tradition, pride, and duty. His uniform was pristine, the buttons gleaming in the pale sunlight, and the iconic bearskin hat commanded quiet reverence. But not from everyone. The serenity of the scene shattered as a loud, nasal laugh cut through the air. Emerging like a character straight out of a comedy sketch was a tall man in a garish t-shirt blaring "London Baby" in obnoxious block letters. He wasn't alone, though he certainly acted as if the world were his stage. The man, an American tourist judging by his accent, had clearly decided he was the protagonist of this very moment. "Hey, buddy," he hollered, stepping out of the crowd and waving his arms like he was directing a traffic. "You alive in there? Come on, crack a smile for me." The guard, true to form, remained stoic, his eyes locked straight ahead as if he hadn't heard a word. His composure, carved from years of discipline, was unshakable, or so it seemed. But the tourist wasn't one to be deterred by a lack of response. If anything, it egged him on. He took a few exaggerated steps closer, his flip-flops slapping against the pavement in rhythm with his growing bravado. "What's the deal, man? You guys are supposed to entertain us, right?" he sneered, leaning in as though to inspect the guard's expression. "I mean, I'm a taxpayer back home, so technically this is my show." Ah, there it was. The audacity, the entitlement, the sheer lack of awareness that makes you want to grab a metaphorical bucket of popcorn because you just know it's all about to go sideways. The tourists' antics had drawn a mixed audience. Some in the crowd stifled giggles, more out of secondhand embarrassment than actual amusement. Others exchanged incredulous glances, their raised brows silently screaming, "Can you believe this guy?" A mother shielded her child, muttering, "Some people have no respect," while a group of teens filmed the scene, phones angled perfectly to capture what they hoped would be their next viral TikTok. And still, the guard didn't flinch. His duty was clear, to stand as a symbol of British resilience and tradition, unyielding in the face of, well, exactly this kind of nonsense. But our overzealous tourist, he interpreted the guard's silence as a challenge. He began waving his hands in front of the guard's face, his voice rising with every failed attempt to provoke a reaction. "Hello? Earth to Buckingham Palace. Do you even blink? Oh, wait. Let me guess. It's against the rules." He burst into laughter, the kind that echoed too loudly and lingered just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. It was a car crash in slow motion, one you couldn't look away from, no matter how hard you tried. But here's the thing about tradition and dignity. They don't need to shout to be heard. As the tourist flailed and blustered, the guard remained an unshakable pillar of calm. Every second that passed without a reaction from him was another chink in the tourist's armor. His attempts to assert dominance over a man whose entire existence radiated discipline and pride, they only made him look smaller. The guard didn't just stand there. He stood for something, a reminder that some things, like respect and decorum, aren't for sale, no matter how many plane tickets or overpriced souvenirs you've bought. And while the tourist hadn't yet realized it, the crowd had already turned against him. The murmurs grew louder, the smirks sharper. Someone muttered, "Doesn't he know they're not clowns?" Another whispered, "I hope he gets what's coming to him." Oh, but they wouldn't have to wait long, because karma, as they say, was standing just around the corner, wearing a police badge. "Would you like me to continue?" The guard's patience, an unyielding fortress until now, was finally tested. The tourist, emboldened by his self-imposed role as the center of attention, took a step too far, literally. He moved beyond the designated boundary, venturing dangerously close to the towering horse stationed nearby. The horse, clearly unimpressed by the sudden intrusion, let out a sharp, nervous snort and shifted its weight with an audible clop. The crowd gasped, their collective intake of breath breaking the tense silence. The tourist, startled, stumbled backward, flailing his arms to regain balance. "Whoa, what is that thing's problem?" he blurted, his voice rising an octave, as he narrowly avoided falling flat on his back. His expression, once smug, now wavered between irritation and embarrassment. Oh, the irony. The man who moments ago had been playing the fearless provocateur now looked like he was moments away from fleeing. It was almost poetic, wasn't it? The audience certainly thought so. A few stifled laughs rippled through the crowd while others exchanged knowing smirks. And then it happened, the moment that transformed the scene. The guard, motionless and silent for so long, turned his head sharply toward the tourist. The movement was precise, almost mechanical, like the turning of a finely tuned clock. When he spoke, his voice was cold and steady, carrying the weight of authority and unshakable discipline. "Step back behind the white line," he commanded, his words slicing through the tension like a blade. The crowd froze. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but stunned silence. This wasn't just a warning. It was a statement, a direct challenge to the tourist's inflated sense of self-importance. The guard's voice, though calm, carried an unmistakable edge, a subtle yet firm reminder that this wasn't a playground, and he wasn't there to provide entertainment. The tourist's face flushed as he scrambled to find a witty comeback, but nothing came. His bravado, so potent mere moments ago, evaporated under the weight of the guard's unyielding gaze. He opened his mouth, but before he could stammer out another ill-conceived retort, an unmistakable figure appeared at the edge of the scene. A police officer, tall and impeccably uniformed, strode forward with a deliberate purpose. His presence alone was enough to part the crowd, which seemed all too eager to give him room. The officer's eyes locked onto the tourist, his expression a portrait of polite but unmistakable authority. "Sir," the officer began, his tone measured but firm, "you are disturbing public order. Step aside immediately, or you will be removed." The tourist blinked, his bravado crumbling under the weight of the officer's words. He tried to laugh it off, waving a hand dismissively. "Oh, come on. I was just having a bit of fun. No harm done, right?" But the officer wasn't in the mood for excuses. He raised a hand, silencing the tourist's feeble protest. "This is not up for discussion. Step back now." The crowd erupted into applause, a wave of approval sweeping over the scene. Some spectators even cheered, their voices carrying an unmistakable note of vindication. The tourist, now the center of attention for all the wrong reasons, turned a shade of crimson that rivaled the iconic double-decker buses. His bravado reduced to awkward mutterings, he shuffled back into the crowd, his retreat met with a few sarcastic claps and not a shred of sympathy. As for the guard, he turned back to his post, his face once again a mask of calm. His duty was not to engage, not to falter, but to stand tall, a living testament to tradition and discipline. Yet, in that one calculated moment, he had sent a message more powerful than any display of force. Respect is earned, not demanded, and it will not be compromised for the sake of a cheap laugh. The audience began to disperse, their chatter filled with admiration for the guard and disdain for the tourist. Some even stopped to take photos of the guard, not for the sake of a joke, but as a token of respect. It was clear that today, the values he represented had triumphed over the noise and chaos of the modern world. The officer's firm grip on the tourist's arm sent an unmistakable signal. This show was over. The man, who moments ago strutted with the swagger of someone who thought the world owed him its stage, now looked as though he wished the ground would swallow him whole. His companions, likely regretting ever agreeing to this ill-fated adventure, hurried to conceal their faces from the growing swarm of camera phones pointed in their direction. It didn't take long for the videos to hit social media. Within minutes, captions like "Entitled Tourist Gets What He Deserves" and "Queen's Guard Teaches a Lesson in Respect" began to circulate. The comments section was an unforgiving battleground. "Finally, someone put him in his place," one viewer wrote, capturing the collective sentiment of the internet. "What did he think would happen? It's not a theme park," added another, their exasperation practically leaping off the screen. "Serves him right," concluded a third, earning hundreds of likes for their blunt assessment. As the digital world buzzed with vindication, the guard quietly returned to his post, his movements as deliberate and measured as they were before the commotion. To him, this was just another day in service, another demonstration of discipline and duty. He stood as tall and composed as ever, the ruffled feathers of the scene seemingly forgotten. But as he positioned himself back in line, something subtle but extraordinary happened. His gaze flickered momentarily toward a group of children standing at the front of the crowd, their wide eyes still fixed on him as though he were a figure from a fairy tale. With the faintest movement, the guard offered one of them a barely perceptible wink. It was so small, so fleeting, that many missed it entirely. But for those who caught it, the gesture was nothing short of magical. The children's faces lit up, their delight spreading like wildfire among the spectators. Even the most stoic adults couldn't suppress a smile. And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. Applause erupted, this time directed solely at the guard. It wasn't the polite clapping of tourists acknowledging a spectacle. It was heartfelt, full of gratitude and admiration. Here was a man who had faced absurdity with grace, who upheld tradition without losing his humanity. The tourist, now a figure of ridicule, slinked away into the crowd, his shoulders hunched and his bravado entirely drained. His punishment wasn't just being escorted away by the police, it was the humiliation of being the only one who didn't seem to understand the values at play. The guard, on the other hand, remained the quiet hero of the day. He didn't need to say a word to reclaim the dignity of his post, or remind everyone why it mattered. As the crowd began to disperse, murmurs of approval filled the air. "He handled that perfectly," someone said. "Such a class act." "Tradition still means something," added another, their tone almost wistful. And as the guard stood silently under the gaze of Buckingham Palace, it was clear to all who witnessed the scene that he wasn't just a soldier in uniform. He was a symbol, a reminder that respect, even in an age of selfies and social media, still has the power to hold its ground.